Hello and welcome to Walker Tea Review. Jason Walker here, and I've got a Japanese green tea today. I'm going to go ahead and get started as I talk. And of course, the big hubbub with Japanese green teas right now is it radioactive? Is it going to extend your life or increase your half-life? Now, that whole area the whole topic has been kind of blown somewhat out of proportion. Of course, there are still studies coming out, still findings, and they're continuing to monitor the areas. But the major Japanese green tea producing areas are hundreds of miles away from the nuclear fallout, the nuclear radiation. Of course, winds can carry, but what it looks like is that for the most part, those major areas are not affected at least not too dangerous or concerning, alarming levels. But of course, the other aspect is that a tea can be grown and harvested safely away, but yet could be sent through a port that is much closer to that area, and in which case there it is sitting in a container, soaking up those lovely rays of that radiation, and it's or sitting on a boat that's passing by and getting radiation that way. So you want to be able to look at, one, when did the tea, where was it harvested? Secondly, what ports, harbors, transport, how did it come in and out of the country and go from that farm to your cup? So, but what you see I'm doing right now is I scooped out enough, because I have a pretty small container, pinched out enough to cover the bottom, so about an inch diameter of my 4-ounce gaiwan here. My water has been brought to a low boil. It's been cooling for over a minute and a half, which is fine for a Japanese green tea. You generally want some cooler, gentler temperatures for those, although at the same time, to be fair, I don't want to go too far. I try to get general similar levels of temperature for Japanese greens across the board, which is generally lighter than, or a little lower than, for other teas that I may be tasting here. So while that's steeping for just a few minutes, let me talk about this tea and introduce it. This is a sample size of David's Tea. David's Tea is in Canada. Multiple locations, but they can be found online. This is their GyokuroYamashiro. Okay, 50 grams. They've got a couple of grades or different kinds of Gyokuro. This is their GyokuroYamashiro. 50 grams available for $22. This is probably a 2010 tea. I received this tea late May, early June. And so this is likely a tea that had been brought in 2010, so even less concern of radiation. And if that's still a concern for you, you want to ask David's Tea when you place an order, is this a 2010 harvest or a 2011 harvest? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the dry leaf for just a few seconds and talk about that. Get it open up here. Japanese Gyokuros, they are shaded in the generally roughly 2 weeks prior to harvest, so that the leaves become more intensely green. The reaction of that plant is to really push itself to draw. That loss of sunlight means that they're producing more chlorophyll to capture as much remaining sun that they can get and make the most use of that. So you got dark, rich, green-blue leaves, and these needles that I was looking at here, because they're the way that they're shaped, these are fine filament needle-like. Needle as far as a thinness, not necessarily the needle shape of, say, a Chinese green tea, but a nice long filament over. Well, many of them are an inch or so in length. Not all of them, of course, because they can be delicate and brittle. Of course, you have some that are broken as well in there. Aromas, though, you're also getting a cream spinach type smell, which is a nice sweet characteristic of gyokuro like this. At the same time, I'm getting a little bit of a marine type of smell, and that comes out many times, not every time. And with that marine, there's also kind of a metallic type of smell. There's something that's like a bag of nickels or something. If you ever taken your coins to the bank to get them counted or changed, you smell all that big pile of coins. There's that metal kind of smell there. I'm gonna go ahead and pour now, and so we should be ready to go here. Angled my lid over to the side just a little bit to give myself a pouring space. I'm blending traditions here. I've got my Chinese style gaiwan, which is my vessel here, with a Japanese style tea, which should generally works out just fine because it gives you a standard, fairly convenient way to steep, prepare a tea, and to re-steep as well. I'm going to go ahead and smell the wet leaves here. Now, aromas have transitioned over to a little bit more of a, there's a little bit of almost a lima bean type smell. So it's getting a little bit more of a vegetal type. Still there's a nice rich salted butter type of, it's got something it smells creamy if there is such a thing. It smells like there's going to be some heft to this. And again, it's just something that smells kind of like it's been exposed to salt. It's got a salty type of smell to it. So, again, lima bean, a little bit of lima bean, buttery, salty, rich, kind of creamy, hefty type of smell. Okay, I'm going to scrape off these leaves that I have here and pull out a few that would give us a range of leaves to look at and talk about here, because I do have some larger pieces that is easier to look at, easier to talk about. This one I'm going to try to pull off any remaining little portions of leaves that have been stuck to it. But that gives you an idea that's around an inch in width and about an inch. It's rectangular, but a little over an inch, or about an inch in length. Let me pull out just a few more here. They're tender. They're still a deep green color, not as bluish as that original the dry leaf looked, but still delicate, tender, easily torn, easily pulled apart between your fingers. Sometimes you'll get a little stem or middle vein there as well that's come out. This is actually a tip. I do want to open this up so that you can kind of see the jagged edges of the leaf. You don't see a lot of there's no oxidation, browning, bruising that took place on these, so that's a good sign as well. Let me flatten that out so that stays visible. Yes, and good. Now, I'm going to move on and talk about the liquor here. First off, give it a good swirl here, hold it up to the light. One things I'm noticing, it is still a rich, greenish, yellowish green, I would say. I mean, that's the first thing I notice. It's almost a bright, it's got a good brightness. It's not flat or dull. The other thing I notice is just how cloudy it is. You don't look through this. I mean, it's got there's a lot of components floating around in there, so that's something to note and to consider. So it almost gives it a light kind of milky type of look to it. That cloudiness kind of makes it look lighter. Again, sweet cream spinach, but there's still something kind of ocean, marine saltiness in there as well that comes out. So this says sweet, it says fresh vegetable, it says salty. So it it has potential so far. Let me go ahead and give this a taste. Nice texture. This is ever so subtly astringent, which gives it not necessarily a drying sensation, but gives it a thickness, a coating aspect. Yet it's like melted butter, so it's not quite as thick as melted butter, but it's got a coating aspect to it. It's got a bit of a salty. It's got a light, faint, creamy sensation to it. So it does blend well with it's got a sweet pea type of taste or aroma. It's got a little bit of that cream. It's still got that cream spinach in there. That metallic that came out in the dry leaf aroma isn't standing out at this point. So it's backed off the way that it should. So it gives it a richness, a sweetness, a heftiness to it. In previous tastings off camera, this was a generally fairly forgiving tea. I tested, kind of pushed it to its limits. I poured in some boiled water, well, close to boiling water that had cooled. I poured it. I left it several minutes, more than 5 minutes, so that it dropped down to room temperature, and yet it still wasn't over steeped. It wasn't harsh. It didn't get too astringent or bitter. So that's a positive. Also, I steeped it more than once, and you are likely to get 2 to 3, if you play your cards right, steeps out of this that you can appreciate. So as I look at this tea, I would give this tea a 92. It's got good qualities to it. I could have found or could have hoped for a little bit more intensity in those characteristics, but they are all there. It's forgiving. It's got staying power. Even the aftertaste, it's still got residual taste, feel in my mouth. So those are still there, and things to look for, things to appreciate about this tea. So come back to Walker Tea Review, where I hope you find teas that make you want to come back, and things that you appreciate in your teas as well.